Hello and welcome. Again, my name is Callie Chappelle, and thank you for watching this video, Introduction to the Disadvantage, Part 2, detailing the dissad and debates. This is part of my larger video series called the Go Fight Win Novice series, which is for education of novices in policy debate. So, my name is Callie Chappelle again. I'm a debater for the University of Michigan. I debated at Traverse City Central High School. I'm a second negative, first affirmative speaker. And a fun fact about me with disads is that I like to disguise disadvantages as on-case arguments. Alright, so how do you make the most out of these videos? You should do two things. First, take notes, and second, you should rewatch bits you need re-explained. This video, especially, and the previous video, has kind of a lot of information in it that's very technical, so it's totally okay if you have to rewatch parts. It's, like, pretty confusing. Alright, hopefully we'll have a worksheet and or supplemental materials that goes along with the video, so check the video description to see if I posted those. Next, you don't need to memorize it all. At least be familiar with everything in the video, but it's a building process, and this video and then part 3 are all, like, pretty, like, detailed descriptions of disads, so if you just get the bare minimum, that's really okay. And finally, your coach may like things differently, or you may like to debate in a different style. If you're interested in debating in different styles, just definitely let me know in the context, and I'll see if I can direct you to resources that can help you with that. I'm not saying this style is the best way or the end-all be-all. Instead, I'm just saying that this is a starting point from where I learned, and that it's just one way, not the best way. Alright, Throwback Thursday. Back to the part 1, had the dissad basics, right? So we had two big things. First was parts of the dissad, and second was impact calculus revisited. If you don't remember the parts of the dissad, or if you are a little bit shaky on impact calc, you should definitely go back and rewatch that video, and I also highly recommend rewatching the risk assessment video as well, because there's a lot of information regarding dissads in that video. Alright, so what are the parts of a dissad again? So if you didn't go back, pause the video and rewatch the other one. If you're unclear, then it's going to come back to bite you now. So, parts of a dissad, pause the video, think about it. If you said it was the uniqueness, link, and impact, you would be right. Good job. Alright, so now I'm going to really test you. So we're going to label parts of the dissad. So, pause the video, read these options, and write down next to the A, B, and C whether it's the uniqueness, link, or impact, okay? Okay, so I'm going to assume that you did it. Alright, marine ecosystems are sustainable now. That is the uniqueness, right? Because it's describing the status quo. It's describing what's happening now. They're sustainable. It's additionally, you can know that it's uniqueness because it's the opposite of the impact, right? It's the opposite of the unsustainability of marine ecosystems, which is what happens if the plan is implemented, alright? So, part B, that means that part B, that aquaculture means that farm fish will start eating wild fish, driving overfishing. This must be the link, right? Because aquaculture, if we're assuming the opposite aquaculture, causes something to happen. It causes overfishing, right? Because the farm fish in the aquaculture eat wild fish. And finally, that means that this last part must be the impact, right? That overfishing collapses the marine ecosystem, which destroys ocean biodiversity, collapsing the food chain, and causing extinction, right? So this is the final worst thing that happens. So this is how you can identify that is the impact specifically. All right, take 2, coastal unemployment DA. So again, pause the video, write uniqueness, link, or impact next to A, B, and C. And then on pause. Okay, I'm going to assume that you already did this. Okay, so let's talk about this. Unemployment undermines economic growth, democratic institutions, and creates long-term economic inequality. Well, this sounds to me like it could be an impact, right? So how do I know that? Because we're talking about the implications of the plan, or the implications of what we're saying the plan will cause, right? So unemployment undermines economic growth and causes long-term economic inequality. So that sounds like a bad thing, economic inequality, that's caused by the plan. Okay, let's look at part B. Alright, so aquaculture subsidies harm coastal communities. They drive local fishers out of business and shift fishing profits to corporations. Alright, so the big hint is that it talks about the ass specifically, right? Aquaculture. It harms coastal communities. So it's talking about something that aquaculture, the plan, causes to happen. Well, that sounds like it's a link, and indeed that would be correct. Part B is the link, right? Because they drive local fishers out of business and shift fishing profits to corporations. Well, that makes sense because if local farm fishers are going out of business, then that causes the impact, part A, of unemployment, which undermines economic growth, the democratic institutions, and creates long-term economic inequality. Okay, well, by order of elimination, that means that part C must be the uniqueness, and let's see if we're right? Recent analysis of long-term economic trends shows that coastal fishing communities are thriving. They provide stable employment and contribute billions to the U.S. economy. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense why that would be uniqueness, because it's recent analysis of long-term economic trends. So we're looking at the status quo, and we're looking at how the status quo looks at long-term economic trends, and that there's stable employment. Okay, so that's the second part of uniqueness, that not only do we talk about what's happening in the status quo, but our picture of the status quo has to be kind of the opposite of the bad thing that the AF causes. So if the AF causes unemployment, then you have to say that there is stable employment now, which it does. Okay, all right, so here's the last part. What part of the DA is missing? So we're going to use the spending DA. So let's label each part, and then let's talk about what part is missing from this. Okay, so pause the video, fill in the blanks, and then come back. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've already done this, all right? So the federal budget is set now. So it's describing what's happening in the status quo, so therefore it's uniqueness. Great job. All right, the second part, a credit downgrade would destroy the U.S. economy, okay? So that sounds like a pretty bad thing that they're inferring the plan would cause, destroying the U.S. economy. So I'm going to say that's the impact, okay? So we have uniqueness, we have impact. What is the part of the decide that we're missing? The link. We're missing the link. So what would the link say for the spending DA? It would say that the spending for the plan would break the federal budget, or like would not be part of the current set for the federal budget, and that would cause a spending downgrade because it causes investors to be less to have less security in U.S. spending. Okay. All right. So let's talk about how to extend a disad, okay? So the first part of extending, and when would we extend a disad? So we'll extend a disad in either the 2NC, in the 1NR, and in the 2NR if we're going for a disad, okay? So I'm going to talk about how you would do this in each of those speeches in the 2NC, the 1NR, and the 2NR. Okay, so the first part is the overview. So the overview has two parts. This should be pretty quick, like 30 seconds maximum. So the first part is the story of the DA. So this is a quick blurb about what the DA is about. And the second part is impact calculus. So this is why your impacts matter, as explained above. So you should always start out the impact calculus saying disad outweighs and turns a case, and then the second part is explaining why, all right? So we're going to talk about the spending DA, and I'm going to point out how you would do this, all right? So the part that I'm going to read is an overview, so like what you would say in a debate, and I'm going to point out where the story of the DA and impact calculus comes into play with this, okay? So right now the economy is high. However, if we pass the plan, which is very expensive, it's perceived as wasteful spending, which causes companies to downgrade our credit rating, which kills U.S. economy, and U.S. economic collapse leads to nuclear war. Okay, so that's the story of the decide. We explained quickly the uniqueness, link, and impact, okay? So right now the economy is high. That's the uniqueness. However, if we pass the plan, which is very expensive, it's perceived as wasteful spending. That's the link. Causes companies to downgrade our credit rating, which kills the U.S. economy, which leads to nuke war. That's the impact, okay? So, story of the DA. Next part, impact calculus. Nuclear war leads to total extinction, which we can never come back from. And an economic collapse is the fastest time frame, since our uniqueness evidence means that we're on the brink now. If we pass the plan, it'll push us past the point of no return. Okay? So that's the explanation of how we win on magnitude, total extinction, and also time frame, short-term economic collapse. Okay? Finally, if you're really good, you can talk about the impacts of the DA causing the impacts of the plan to happen. So the last part of the impact calculus should not just be magnitude, time frame, probability, but also should be how you turn the case, how the decide turns the case. So, for example, if the plan solves food wars, you could say that economic collapse would destroy the global supply chain, causing food wars. Thus, the DA means the AF causes the impacts they're trying to solve for. So the AF says they solve for food wars, but by collapsing the economy, the AF actually causes food wars to happen. Okay? The second part is the line by line. So what is line by line? This is where you respond to their arguments and extend or explain your own arguments. So this should be in the order of the previous AF speech. So let's talk about how you do this. So link back to when you watch the intro to refutation video about how to do line by line refutation, okay? So that's they say, but I disagree because therefore format. So that was the lawyer, but you can also do the engineer or the poet. It doesn't matter which one, just as long as you do it well. So, as I said, first you say what AF argument you're responding to, so the judge knows. Second, you extend the piece of evidence by author, so you'd say extend our Smith 10 card. Next, you say the general idea of the argument, like no link, impact is extinction, uniqueness means economy is high now. Next, you explain the warrant in the evidence. So this is where I don't know why this got cut off, but this is where you explain kind of the reasons why your argument is true based on what the evidence says. And finally, you would need to explain why your evidence is better. So that's evidence comparison. So let's say your piece of evidence was from a peer-reviewed journal and the AF's evidence was from a blog. You'd say you should prefer our peer-reviewed journal because more people have looked at it, which means that it has overall expert consensus, which indicates that it's more likely to be true than just one person's opinion, e.g. from Joe Schmo's blog. Okay? So here's an example. So the AF says, plan is cheap, Joe Blogger 02. Neg says, they say the plan is cheap, but 1, extend our link evidence, Smith 12, 2, that's number 1, right, in the checklist that you should have just written down. 2, that the plan is very expensive. 3, because empirically aquaculture costs more than initial expectations. And 4, this is where you compare your evidence, you prefer Smith because he has a PhD in Latin American policies. Oh no, it should say in ocean policies. And is the president of the Congressional Budget Office, and their evidence is from a blog. Okay? So go back, compare kind of what I just said to the checklist of things that I said about how to extend an argument, and compare those things. If you do this for every single argument and you do it quickly, then you will be an amazing novice. All right, so the third part is extend dropped arguments. So extending dropped parts. So if they drop or don't answer a part of the disad, don't drop it too. Just like cross-ex, don't Vegas, right? What we say, like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, what happens in cross-ex shouldn't stay in cross-ex. It should go in your speech. And what fails to happen, what fails to happen in the AF speech, in the 2AC, shouldn't also happen in your speech, the 2NC, the 1NR, or the 2NR, right? So if they drop something, or if they fail to answer, like, for example, uniqueness, then you should explain it really well and explain why that argument is important. So you should always say, they dropped X arg, uniqueness, for example, so you're voting neg because X, Y, Z. Remember, silence is consent. If they drop it and you drop it too, then there's no way that you can exploit the fact that they really messed up, right? However, just because they dropped it, that doesn't mean that you should spend all your time on it. You should explain it sufficiently, but you don't need to waste all of your time on it. Instead, you should make sure that you answer all of their arguments, right? So here's an example for dropped arguments. So they dropped the impact, they've conceded, so like let's say they dropped the impact, right? So you say they dropped the impact, they've conceded that X will cause extinction 100%. We will win, our impact outweighs the AF on time frame, magnitude, and probability because they dropped it, right? Or they dropped uniqueness, the budget is set now, extend our author and date, e.g. Smith 12. There's no chance the budget will change unless the plan happens. This also means we control the direction of the link because the only way spending could trade off with NASA is if the plan causes changes to spending to happen. Okay? So that's an example of how you'd handle dropped arguments in a debate round. Okay, so last but not least, the last topic I want to talk about is kicking out of things. So this is a really big, important topic. And it requires you to understand stuff about disads, but it also requires you to understand kind of the larger meta-level concepts in a debate. So one of the big purposes of a debate is to start out making a lot of arguments and then pare them down throughout the debate where you just go for 1 or 2 big arguments in the final rebuttals, e.g. the 2NR or 2AR. Right? So you're in the 1NC, you're going to read lots of arguments. So you're going to read a disad, you're going to read a counterplan, you're going to read case arguments, you're going to read topicality. But you don't want to go for all those arguments. You don't want to extend all those arguments all the way to the 2NR because there's too much to explain. Remember, you've got to answer all of your opponent's arguments. And as the constructives happens, there are more and more of your opponent's arguments. So it makes sense that you want to narrow down kind of what you go for in the 2NR so you can explain it the best, right? But how do we get rid of all the arguments we don't want to go for? We kick out of them. So before I leave this slide, the big terms that you need to know are kicking out and go for, okay? So go for is the one that you explain really well in the rebuttals, and kicking out is where you remove an argument from a debate. So think about this debate, okay? So here's a typical debate. So the 1AC is the AF. The 1NC is a T violation, 2 disads, counterplan, and a K, plus arguments on the case. The 2AC answers everything in the 1NC. The 2NC extends the counterplan and arguments on the case. And the 1NR extends 1 disad. So here's a question. Where did the K and other disad go in the neg block? Well, they were kicked out of. I'll explain how to do this in a second. So the 1AR picks and chooses a few good arguments they want to explain on the counterplan disad and really explains their case by answering all the neg arguments about it. Okay, the 2NR just extends the disad and arguments about the case. So where did the counterplan go, right? Well, the 2NR must have kicked out of it, okay? So the 2AR, finally, obviously answers all the neg on case arguments and explain why their case outweighs the DA and makes arguments against the DA. So this is like a snapshot of what the progression of a debate could be, right? But as you can see, in the block, we lost one DA and a K, and in the 2NR, we lost a counterplan. So we whittled down kind of the large structure of the debate by the final rebuttals. So why do you do this? As a negative, we don't want to go for everything in the final rebuttal because we want to explain everything really well to do two things. First, to be more persuasive to the judge, so they vote neg, and so we can fully explain why the case sucks, right? In both situations, we need our time to shine, and we can't have our time to shine if we go for everything. But hey now, don't we want to make a lot of arguments in the 1NC and block to make it hard for the 2AC and 1AR? Well, yeah, you're right. But we can get the best of both worlds when we can kick out of unwanted arguments, okay? So how do you kick out of a DA? Finally getting there. All right, so the big picture is that you're going to strategically concede one of your opponent's defensive arguments. So how do you do this? So all you have to do is say, extend X defensive argument, we're kicking out of the DA, okay? So let's think about this. So how do you pick what argument? Well, here, let's go back. Right? So let's think about what defense is, right? So defense is going from saying, in the debate going from the AF saying the AF is awesome to the AF does nothing, okay? So we don't want to extend something that goes from like saying the AF is awesome to the AF is worse than the status quo. You just want to neutralize it, okay? So that's why we extend a defensive argument. So how do we decide what argument to extend? Well, you can use this handy flowchart that I made, okay? So first question you should ask yourself is the impact to the DA the same as another neg impact in the round? So like, let's say the impact to the DA is economic collapse, and then let's say on case you say, and let's say you want to go for a DA where the impact is economic collapse, but you already have something and you want to kick out of that one, but you already have a DA that you do want to go for where the impact is economic collapse. Okay, so if that's the case, yes, then you should ask yourself, did the AF read a link turn? If you don't know what a link turn is right now, that's okay. We're going to talk about it in the next video. But you should kind of keep this in mind when you should come back to this flowchart after you learn what a link turn is, and it'll make more sense. If the answer is yes and yes, then you're dumb. You need to concede impact defense on the DA, but you can't go for that impact on the other neg arguments. You'll have to go for a different impact or just a different argument in general. But if the AF did not read a link turn, then you can either concede no uniqueness or no link on the DA. Okay, so what happens if the impact of the DA is not the same as another neg impact in the round? Then all you have to do is concede the impact defense so there's no impact to the DA. So here's a disclaimer. You can follow this flowchart when you can, but always concede an argument that the AF team made. So for example, maybe the AF team didn't make a no impact arg. Then you can't concede no impact because that argument's just not in the debate round, right? And also, warning, do not concede no uniqueness if the AF reads a link turn. Question, if you know what a link turn is, what are the two parts of it? And I'll explain why that is when we talk about link turns in the next video. Alright, so why defense? Remember the defense-offense paradigm. If you want to take out the DA, you want to take out the DA. You just don't want to have to deal with it anymore. You just want to concede that the AF's right? But you don't want to do it in such a way that allows the AF to have another advantage to themselves, right? So you don't want to concede their offense, AF offense, because you essentially just allow them to have a new advantage. So you want to send defense that just neutralizes that position. Okay, so Throwback Thursday. Remember the straight turn? So we talked about straight turns in the impact calculus, video. And this is when the AF only extends offensive arguments, so you can't extend a defensive argument and kick out of it. So that's why you have to go for straight turned arguments. If this doesn't make sense to you, then you should watch the third video and rewatch the impact calculus video, and it should make more sense. Okay? So Throwback Thursday for real though. So I just put a couple of funny videos of me in high school in here. So here's me. I told you I did musical theater. I was in the show Oklahoma, so there I am. All right. And here we go. Here's me and my Novice Debate partner at my high school graduation. So yeah, yay, Throwback Thursday. All right, so I hope this video was educational to you. If you have questions, always feel free to comment in the comment section. And hopefully the final questions will be resolved in part 3. which is answering DAs on the AF. So these are the AF components of the offensive defense paradigm, and it just talks to you. I'm going to talk to you about how to answer these bad boys when you're affirmative. So hope this is helpful, and join us next time for part 3. Thanks!